Hey everyone, welcome back to Pop Incursions. I'm Nico, and today we are going to break down the first episode of season 2 of Loki.
This is chaos magic.
And yet I was the bad guy.
We are not killing anyone!
That's who built this place! That's who stole your life! Hey, brother!
Oh, that's let's talk to
So I know that I'm a week late, but I was away on holidays for a few days, so that is the reason why we didn't have a breakdown video for you last week. But here it is. Apologies for the delay. There will be a breakdown video for episode 2 and all the other episodes. Now, the only thing I can promise is that it's out straight after the episode. I don't get any pre-screening, so as soon as I watch the episode on a Friday morning, I'm working all the way through Friday to try and write it, film it and edit it, but the editing takes quite some time often, so my goal is to try have it out by the Monday after the episode on the latest, but I will try my best, and I do intend to do a breakdown video for all episodes. So, episode 1 of season 2 of Loki. Before we really get into it, I just have to say this episode was such a high quality, exciting, and it got you back into kind of the rhythm and the feeling that, okay, it's the MCU, it's high stakes, but it's still good quality. I have to say, I was a little bit worried that because not all the same people that worked on the first series was going to the second, I was worried that I wouldn't feel like Loki, it wouldn't feel like the first season, it would feel a bit, but it's really, really good, and if you haven't checked it out, I cannot recommend it enough. And obviously, for all the breakdown videos, there are spoilers. So we get a brief recap of the events of season 1.
Welcome to the Time Variance Authority. I'm Miss Minutes.
Long ago, there was a vast multiversal war. All-knowing timekeepers emerged, organizing the sacred timeline.
And Loki is sent back to the TVA through a time door that Sylvie sent him through using the tempad of He Who Remains, and that's very important as it will link to the next few episodes. When Loki does return to the TVA, Mobius and Hunter B15 do not recognize him, do not know him, and in classic TVA style, and I mean classic, the first reaction is to call for the Minutemen and prune him. It's such a TVA thing, and if you've watched season 1, I think you'll know what I mean when I say that. But instead of like sitting down and going through, what's going on, what are you trying to tell us, their jerk reaction is prune him, catch him, and get rid of him. As Mobius, Hunter B15, and the Minutemen are chasing after Loki, he actually has to jump off the side of kind of one of the corridors of the TVA, and he lands in a flying car. And the person is so startled that they crash into a statue of He Who Remains, or of Kang, because we actually are not 100% sure whether Kang from Quantumania, Kang the Conqueror, is He Who Remains. There are theories that they're the same person. So, do we say that Kang built the TVA, or He Who Remains built the TVA? But that is something that we're going to constantly have to deal with throughout this season. But as for now, I will just refer to Kang in general. After crashing into the statue, they're so startled that they don't look where they're going, and they end up crashing into an analyst kind of workspace. And who is there? Lo and behold, it's KC. But it's not KC doing the job that we saw him in season 1. It's KC almost as kind of cleaning services or a janitor. And a very good Easter egg is that not only is Casey listening to music on the same device that Star-Lord Peter Quill uses, but what he's listening to is the same sleep podcast that Stephen Grant was listening to in Moon Knight.
Solving puzzles is a great way to keep your mind awake. Hello, and welcome to Staying Awake. Solving puzzles is a great way to keep your mind awake.
And as Loki is trying to kind of beg Casey to remember him, he time slips. And this is the phrase or the verb that is being used to describe what's happening to Loki. When Loki time slips, he's actually transported back to the same place, but in the past, future, or present. When this happens, Loki ends up time slipping back to the future, pun intended, of the TVA, where KC, Mobius, and Hunter B-15 know who Loki is. They remember the events that have happened. And they begin to try and work out what exactly has happened, what's up with the branching, what happened with Sylvie and He Who Remains, and why is he time slipping. The sacred timeline has essentially been freed, and the timeline is branching like crazy. While this is happening, Loki ends up time slipping back to the past. While this is happening, a hunter that we haven't really met before, Hunter X05, summons Mobius and Hunter B-15 to the war room. And with Judge Renslayer gone in search of free will, Judge Gamble and General Dox have made up a new judges' council, and they request to see both Mobius and Hunter B-15 in the war room. Now, when Hunter X5 is asking Mobius, he does it in a very rude and condescending way, where to catch Mobius's attention, he starts asking him about the jet skis in a magazine, knowing that, you know, that's his gig. Mobius loves jet skis. But then he turns into a jerk. And Hunter X5's unnecessary rudeness is already red flags and setting him up to be a not so good guy, which matches what we've seen of him in the trailers. While on the way to the war room, Hunter B-15 and Mobius both agree and decide that they're just going to tell them the truth, that the TVA is fake, they're all variants,
I looked happy.
and the timeline is branching. Power surges are also beginning to affect the TVA, no doubt related to the branching sacred timeline. While Mobius and Hunter B-15 are waiting to enter the war room, a hunter with the name Hunter D90 leaves the war room and bumps into Mobius and Hunter B-15. And this is the same hunter that Ravonna Renslayer ordered to prune Mobius. And Hunter D90 comes out with his tail behind his legs and says that he was just doing his job and following orders. And of course, that's not an excuse. So we meet our new characters, Judge Gamble and General Dox, as well as this guy who's just sleeping. And it's a little bit chaotic, but you know what? It's perfect for the TVA, and I'm actually very excited to have these new characters, a new judge and a General Dox. I suppose the General Dox is almost in charge of the TVA's own police force, that police, you know, the TVA from the inside, on top of Minutemen then doing that on the sacred timeline. Back in the past, where Loki has time slipped, we can see that he is also in the war room, but in the past. And in the past, in the war room, the mural was not of the timekeepers, but of Kang, or the Council of Kangs, depending on what the actual answer is. But one thing is for sure, it's a Kang at least. And while we see this mural of Kang's, we also then get shots from the future mural of the timekeepers to show us the difference. And Loki is a bit curious as to the recording set on the wall, and he presses play, and what does he hear? Only but Kang and Ravonna Renslayer engaging in a conversation.
You made a difference in this war. Thank you for being on my team for all time.
Always.
So I find that very interesting, but I'm really excited as well that we're finally getting to see the connection between Ravonna Renslayer and Kang, and some kind of concrete evidence that yes, they are actually linked in some way. And I hope that we do actually get to see Ravonna and Kang together as they once were at some point over the multiverse saga. Hunter B-15 and Mobius are attempting to explain themselves, but General Dox is really not taking any prisoners and wants them to do everything by the book and on the record and to follow proper protocol. And she is furious as to why they told everyone to stop pruning. As Hunter B-15 is trying to explain the gravity of the situation, that the TVA is fake, the timekeepers were fake, and we're all variants, Judge Gamble does step in to help Hunter B-15 by saying
D90 testified that he went to the timeline and saw Renslayer's variant.
That Hunter D90 went to the sacred timeline and seen Judge Renslayer's variant, which would corroborate what Hunter B-15 is saying. And Hunter D90 is the same Hunter that we just saw apologizing to Mobius for pruning him, and of course was the Hunter that we saw last season visiting Ravonna on her timeline when she was a teacher named Rebecca.
Secure the perimeter. I've got her.
What the hell is going on here?
Judge Renslayer.
That isn't Judge Renslayer.
With General Dox saying,
if we don't protect it, what on earth are you suggesting?
Clearly they weren't protecting it. In the words of Hunter B-15, they were committing atrocities. And that is not the first time we've heard someone from the TVA believing what they were doing was right, or somehow protection.
Annihilating entire realities, orphaning little girls, classic hero stuff.
This is one thing that throughout the entirety of Loki this is what we are kind of battling, and this is, I suppose, the theoretical concept of Kang the Conqueror being the next big bad, is that, well, you know, there's a point. It's the same with Thanos, it's the same with good villains. You can reason with them, and sometimes it can be hard to actually say, well, you're wrong or you're right. But in this case, it's very hard to say that because it's a lot of grey areas. And I suppose this in itself is almost the theoretical question of Kang the Conqueror in terms of what he wants to do in implementing this one sacred timeline with the TVA to prune realities, to stop the possibility of more Kang variants appearing. And I suppose that's one thing that you're constantly weighing up throughout Loki the series and in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. You know, does the good outweigh the bad? And it's similar to what we've heard from Doctor Strange.
In the grand calculus of the multiverse, their sacrifice means infinitely more than their lives.
But in the grand calculus of the multiverse, your sacrifice is worth more than your life.
I'm actually not going to say this is what they should be doing or shouldn't, because I don't know the full story yet. And kind of similar with Thanos, you know, only when you've seen everything, then you can make a proper judgment on it. But I think that until we actually find out what happens in Secret Wars, for example, it's hard. Maybe with the answer around the TVA by the end of this season of Loki, I'm not sure. Judge Gamble is, I wouldn't say excited, but she definitely seemed a little thrilled that she actually had free will in this decision.
I've always handed down the same verdict, guilty, and the timekeepers deemed it so.
And it's really the first time that she actually feels like she's empowered and she actually has her own free will and her own agency over what she does, and then what she does is give that verdict.
Tell the TVA to stop pruning.
General Dox and Hunter X05 is not happy about that. One thing I will say is I just don't get Hunter X5's over aggressiveness with Loki and Mobius and Hunter B-15. And I hope that it's explained later on when we start to find more things out. Just as Judge Gamble gives her verdict, Loki time slips back to the future. Evidently, Loki is upset and he's stressed and he's worried and he's trying to articulate all of this, but it's also looking a little chaotic, a little manic, and that's making Hunter X05 on edge. Loki, in an effort to try and get them to listen and to show them that what he's saying is true, he prunes the mural, which then shows behind it the mural of Kang. And I thought this was genius. Whoever came up with this concept to do this, it's brilliant. And they definitely listened, as Mobius said. They also, General Dox wanted to somehow find Sylvie to find out what happened at the end of time. And apparently it's her fault that we're in this mess. She also is very affectionate, let's call it, with Hunter X05. And I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like a mother-son relationship. But anyway, very affectionate for someone who seems very cold. But she says the timekeepers were fake, but their warnings were real. And I'm just wondering, what exactly is those warnings? Is the warning about the multiversal war real? Are you understanding Loki? Or are you somehow interpreting it a different way? Or did you receive a separate warning that we don't know about? Mobius and Loki then leave the war room. Loki is frantic and agitated, and Mobius is trying to calm him down. Loki's also explaining to Mobius what happened with He Who Remains and what will happen with the Kang variants and the multiversal war. As much as Loki and Mobius wants to try and do whatever they can to alleviate the situation, Mobius is right in saying that Loki needs to be checked out so we can try and fix the time slipping. Mobius then brings Loki down to repairs, and this is where we meet Ke Huy Quan's character, Ouroboros, or OB for short.
I want to introduce you to...
I'm Ouroboros. Nice to meet you, Loki.
Ouroboros.
Ouroboros. But he calls me OB.
Not only is OB just very charismatic and likable, but there's a sense of kind of innocence to him that makes him more likable. It's quite a funny little bit where through time slipping, Loki is able to speak to OB in the past, so OB in the future can then have the ability to fix the time slipping. And even though OB in the future has just witnessed Loki time slipping, he still says time slipping is impossible in the TVA.
OB, look, for the sake of argument, let's just say if it were possible to time slip in the TVA, how might one remedy... I understand that.
Which obviously is not the case. Now, the big thing and overall kind of note that I made from this interaction is that the rules of the endgame time travel are not applied here. And as Hulk said, changing the past will not change the future.
If you travel to the past, that past becomes your future. And your former present becomes the past, which can't now be changed by your new future.
Exactly.
However, this is not the case here in the TVA, and as Loki time slips, it's the classic time travel of changing something in the past will change it in the future. And it ends up then Loki being the one who gave OB the nickname of OB and not Mobius, as OB then reported. And a lot of questions, not all of them are really answered, to be honest, around the whole time travel. Is it because they're in the TVA and it does sit outside of time and space? However, because He Who Remains wanted to make changes of the TVA, he allowed the TVA to run on its own time, meaning that yes, the TVA is separate from typical time and space, i.e. the timelines, but it has its own kind of sacred timeline, if you will, within it, is one of my theories or possibilities. Or it's actually something to do with the time slipping is perhaps a unique occasion where changing the past can change your future, but nothing has been explained to us or answered, so we just have theories to go on. Ouroboros is the name of the episode, as well as obviously the character, or short, OB. Now, what an Ouroboros actually is a symbol of a dragon, or sometimes a snake, eating its own tail, representing infinity or eternity. So, just like Loki is caught in loops of birth and death and rebirth and death and rebirth and death and rebirth, OB is likely also a part of a cycle. Loki uses time slipping into the past to then fix his time slipping, so when he goes back to the future, OB will have already solved how to fix time slipping.
And would need a temporal aura extractor.
Do you have one of those?
I do not. One temporal aura extractor.
It is a little bit astonishing that this is working, because apparently, you know, according to Endgame, this is not supposed to work like that. But yet it does. So, OB fills us in to fix the time slipping. Loki needs to prune himself, and by doing that, he will be free from time.
Violently rip myself from every thread of time and space.
While this happens, Mobius must be at the temporal loom with an extractor to pull Loki out of the timelines, essentially, and into one entire full being. And I think this is linked to someone's temporal aura, where in the first season, when Loki was first brought into the TVA, they recorded his temporal aura, and as to what I believe, that it is almost like someone's DNA for the timeline. It's their unique signature that they leave, and that is how the TVA can use it to find people, because it's only everyone has a unique temporal aura.
Go ahead and run this for sequence period and any hints of temporal aura.
And if we look at Loki time slipping, perhaps his temporal aura is kind of sprinkled throughout the different timelines, and that's why he keeps time slipping. But if he prunes himself, that will set free all his temporal aura, and as Mobius then extracts all of the Loki's temporal aura from the loom, that's essentially putting his body back together to be present in the present, instead of continuing to just transport to different times. Could be a load of crap, could be true, that's my theory. And there's a risk.
That kind of temporal energy will peel the skin right off you.
Wait, I thought you said not too bad, and now you're talking about me getting my skin peeled off of me?
Oh.
Of Mobius's skin peeling off because of the strength of the temporal radiation. Lots of fun in the TVA. Now, OB also says that the power surges are likely connected to the fact that the timeline is branching and the temporal loom is overwhelmed. Now, I have seen on social media that this door opening is giving people the same vibes of Cerebro opening, and I can see why people make the connection. Now, I don't necessarily think that means we're going to see Cerebro or Professor X this season in Loki, but I do think it might be a little Easter egg or hint that we are going to see the TVA crossover with the X-Men, obviously in Deadpool 3. We then get to see what looks very spectacular, I have to say, and well done to the VFX artists. We can see the different branches all being brought together via the temporal loom to try and make them one sacred timeline. And this is evidently how the sacred timeline was created in the first place. So when we saw the sacred timeline branching back in the last episode of Loki, that was probably the same day. We're probably still in that same day. And this is basically the TVA's effort to try and save all those branches by linking them all together, woving them together, and then thus creating the sacred timeline. We also then learn that Miss Minutes would typically deal with the temporal loom and how it's constructed and just keeping it up to date, while OB would just run diagnostics on it every few hundred years, which I think is interesting, as it seems like every episode we learn more and more that Miss Minutes is not just a little assistant to help people, but really she could be the one in charge of the entire TVA. Now, the only issue with all of this is Loki is only given one chance to do this, or he will be lost to time forever.
You will be lost to time forever, and Mobius will lose all of his skin.
Hunter D90 then comes down to explain that General Dox and her Minutemen are raiding the armory to prepare to find Sylvie. And of course, just at this very inconvenient moment, Loki time slips, and this time he time slips to the future. We then see OB preparing Mobius to go out to the temporal loom in this suit that is obviously very much so like a space suit.
Is this cracked?
You're good.
Now, in the future, Loki is running out of time and he really must find a time stick. As Mobius is out close to the temporal loom, we can see the radiation is peeling the layers of his suit, and eventually, if he stays out there himself. Back in the future, Loki arrives at elevators and there is a phone ringing and alarms going off, which I think we should note and save that note for future episodes. And just as we approach the elevators to the timekeepers, who appears but Sylvie? And she says, "Oh, there you are," as if she's been looking for him. And what happens? He gets pruned in that moment. But the big question is, who pruned him? Because we really didn't see anyone. If you look at it, you can kind of barely make out a shadow, but you have no idea who it is. So who pruned Loki? When we do see Loki meeting Sylvie at the elevators in this surreal moment, it gives me the same kind of vibes as Rocket meeting Lila in Guardians 3, and then him going back to live, similar to what's happening to Loki. Because by pruning him, they're allowing Mobius to be able to extract him from the temporal loom, or else, if not, he'll be lost to time forever. It's a very suspenseful moment when Mobius is waiting and waiting and waiting for Loki to appear, and Obi is saying, "Come on, we have to go back. He's lost to time. There's nothing we can do, and we're all going to die if I don't close all these barriers."
Mobius, you have 30 seconds. 3.
And in true Marvel fashion, just at the last moment, boom, Loki comes in and absolutely rugby tackles Mobius back into the room, and they're both safe. And straight away, we need to find Sylvie. Elsewhere, Hunter B15 and Hunter D90 are witnessing General Dox leave through a time door with other Minutemen. And this seems like an awful lot of Minutemen to find one person, which is obviously Sylvie. Now, it looks like what could be happening is that they are still going ahead to prune timelines, because we know General Dox was not happy with Judge Gamble's decision to stop pruning, and they're bringing a lot of reset charges, which we saw in the first season, which was used to basically prune the rest of the timeline after arresting whoever the variant was. Now, straight away, we're establishing conflict within the TVA. We have Judge Gamble and a lot of the administration staff not wanting to prune. Yet, we have General Dox and a lot of the military staff wanting to prune. So this is setting up a civil war of the TVA. Something doesn't feel right with General Dox. To me, the real question is who's calling the shots, or who is she doing this for? Is she working for a Kang variant? Is she working for Miss Minutes, Ravonna Renslayer? What's going on here? Because it seems strange that a standalone general is going to have so much emotion over whether we should prune or not, and then take just drastic actions to go ahead and go against the orders of her superior. Now, there is a post-credit scene to this first episode, and we see Sylvie, who looks like she's just after coming from killing He Who Remains at the Citadel at the end of time, and she arrives in 1982 Broxton, Oklahoma. And compared to season 1, whenever we change location or time, we were shown on the screen, this time, not only are we shown the time and location, but now it specifies whether this is a branched timeline or a part of the sacred timeline. And I do think that's very important before the next episode. We see Sylvie enter a McDonald's, and we see something that reminds us of the hardships Sylvie has had to go through because of this institution that is the TVA, and the person behind it, Kang, or He Who Remains.
What would you like?
Not squirrel, not possum, not rats. Something that's already dead and nothing with a face.
And of course, Sylvie had to live apocalypse to apocalypse, probably surviving on the bare essentials, having to, hunt her own food and everything to survive because the TVA were chasing her. So this is a luxury for Sylvie. And when she hears that actually we have these new chicken tenders, I think she's quite pleased to hear that. We also see Sylvie looking around and admiring the sentiments between friends and family that we can see in the restaurant. And we can see clearly this is something she has missed a lot. And when she's asked, what would you like? She says, I want a bit of everything. I want to try a bit of everything. And that's very telling. And it's very sweet as well that Sylvie wants to build relationships with other people. She wants this simple, ordinary life that she was never allowed to have because the TVA took her life. Also, this must be the McDonald's that she works in that we've seen from the trailers. So everyone, there's the breakdown of Season 2, Episode 1 of Loki. I really enjoyed this first episode, and it really felt like the stakes were real. This was actually happening, and it just felt very appropriate for what was going on, and the continuity was perfect. It still feels like the same episode from last season's finale, and I'm really excited to get to know the new characters. Answer me this: who do you think General Dox is working for or with? And where do you think Miss Minutes and Ravonna Renslayer have gone? Very, very interesting theories out there, so do share them. My social medias are in the description below. I'd appreciate it if you could give the video a like and click that subscribe button for more breakdowns. We do have an episode 2 video on the way. We will also have plenty of Funko Pops and more MCU related videos. I'm Nico for Pop Incursions. See you next time.